Add myself to the stream. Hello, everyone. All to you was for just a couple of seconds ago, and that's fine. That's fine. Got no problem with that. It is a super duper rainy Saturday evening. Couple of problems here. I've actually lost my hat. Now, I do need some feedback here. Does everyone hear me? I'm looking at you, basically. Chirag Parikh. I believe that's one of you. One of you guys. It's either you and one other hider person that's in there. Whoever it is, tell me if you can hear me, please. And then we'll just kind of get going. I don't want to tell another joke. No one wants to hear my jokes. Because I got two of them. And they're very funny the first and the second time. Second time, I might even say it better than the first time. But they're not that great the third time. And this would be the third time if I said it today. So, can I have some feedback here? If anyone here out there, has not got their coffee yet, who's listening, who's at their keyboard, just tell me. I can hear you, Nathan. No problem. And I'll be like, thank you very much. In the meanwhile, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab today's topic with my keyboard, and then we're just going to add this bad boy here. Oh, I didn't have to. Forgot about that. Chrome tab. That looks good. Ah, all right. So do you hear me, Truck? Just had your tea. Excellent. Glad. Also interesting that you capitalize your T. You must come from a place that takes its tea very, very seriously. By the way, I have the best black tea I've had in my life, interestingly enough, is from France, and the other one is actually from Japan. Two favorite brands. One is Fauxtaku from France, and the other one is Lupicia from Japan. Can you hear me? That's all I want to know. And then we'll get going. Can you hear me? Oh, look at that. I didn't realize that banner was there. I take that off. All right, Chirac's not doing his job. We'll just pretend like everything's going all right. All right, Chirac and everyone else, all two of you there, we're expecting a few more to come in. And that's why, great, you can hear me. Sweet. Thank you for doing your job. Rely on you. Whoever's the most chatty in the chat at the moment is the one who I always rely on. A couple of things. I lost my hat. Don't know where it is. So I can't advertise my hat. Can't advertise and ask. I can't shill for you guys to buy my hat. But if I did, I would say $20 shipped to you. I do the drawn serial number sent to you. All the hard work on my end. It's not sent by like a drop shipping thing. All right. Next thing is the video the live stream, not video. There's an important thing to at least delineate on my end, and for anyone after this point watching has got to remember that this is actually not a video. This is a live stream, and because of that, what is going to happen is there's going to be a little. Maybe I'm reading a comment from somebody. Maybe there's going to be a long intro, 7 minutes. Why is there a long intro? It's not a video, so it's not 7 minutes to get the thing to go longer than 10 minutes so that Google will give me an extra advertisement. This live stream is going to go more than 30 minutes anyway. That's just how it works. That long intro there is so that people can sit down, realize that I'm here, and just get ready and basically have about 7 minutes of time to just get ready, to be there, to be present. So anyone afterwards who's like, why is your video intro so long? You've never seen live streams. There's just no way you've seen a live stream if that's your answer. Anyway, this is a live stream, not the best live streamer. Absolutely not. I agree with you. So if you're gonna, you can badmouth my video, no problem. But don't do it to the intro, man. All right. Anyway, today got a couple things on my mind. I wanted to do this stream a couple of days ago. So if you've already got this probably covered, it's in your brain or out of your brain or whatever else. Also kind of cool to see here that Ashok man, you guys are bringing in the hard names for me to say. Ashok Kandimala, hello, I'm hearing you loud and clear. Thank you very much. I'm a regular reader of Tom's columns. Now, this is good. This is good news. I don't know if Chirag, sorry, but if you guys are, the more the merrier. He's, if you guys are regulars, you know that he's done kind of some of the best work, at least on the analysis side, and some of especially if you compare it to like even Deep Review, they have a lot of insider reports, etc. But I don't think they have the same sort of perspective that Tom does, especially after 10 years or maybe longer. Maybe it's 15, almost 20 years of blogging. Plus the fact he's got the computer background, he's got the photographer background. He's basically, as far as I know, of all the columnists, he's basically as stuck in the middle of everything, as well as wizened as any sort of columnist can be. And it's one of the reasons why I go back to his, sorry, I shouldn't say never say I go back to his columns, his blogs, Sans Mirror and DSLR Bodies. I don't read any others if he has any others, but those are two really great websites to go back to. Again, he's got good reviews. It's basically like John Gruber's wall of text, maybe a photograph here or there. Good analysis. Very good analysis, generally to the point, and he's very good also at addressing readers' concerns as well as opinions that are out there in the ether, either on YouTube, but mainly on places like forum sites. And one of the best reasons, and we're going to see this later on, one of the reasons that's really great to follow him is that if you think he's not responded well enough to something in his column, you may find him in the comments section of your favorite rumor site. And we're going to look at that. The first article, by the way, Ashok's just saying he's to the point, no verbal theatrics. I can barely say the word. That's good. He's certainly above my pay grade in terms of quality. We're going to go over to Fujifilm APS-C is dead. That's a question, actually. Let's add this to the stream. I think everyone can see that. Scroll down here. This was from Fuji. This was at Fujirumors on July 21, 2020. So 4 days ago, I wanted to cover it on the day. I wasn't able to. There was a problem. But it was actually I think that Patrick does some very good work in terms of he's obviously a fan of Fujifilm. There's a lot of fans of Fujifilm, but he's very good at addressing the fanboy element within himself, and sort of balancing it with, as far as he understands the world around him, the camera sales, as well as why you're into a brand and into their product. Is it because of out and out performance? Is it because of the compactness? Is it because of looks? That is actually a real thing. Is it because you feel that something has soul? Is it because the lens qualities? There's a million things that people are into it. And one of the reasons that Fujifilm's APS-C, okay, again, I'm speaking to the choir, I think. One of the reasons why Fujifilm's APS-C line is so popular is because they address the high end and the low end. And that goes with lenses as well as cameras. And because they do that, and because that is their smallest sensor range of interchangeable lens cameras, and they have the GFX, because of that, they basically push as high quality as you can get into whatever price niche they have. Now they have a low end price niche, and they have some interesting features, etc. And they've got the high end like the XT4, XH1, X Pro 3. And that group, of course, is a high-end camera range that, as we know, is basically as expensive as a low-end full-frame camera. And that is why probably I believe that Patrick felt compelled to write this article, especially in lieu of the Nikon Z5. So let's hit this article right here. I'm not going to read all of it, just kind of some good parts here, I think. Firstly, I'm a fan of competition. This is Patrick, by the way. I want camera manufacturers to fight for customers, to work hard to squeeze new tech into cameras, and as much and as fast as possible for the most affordable price they can. Hence, the more sub $2,000 full frame cameras hit the market, the more I am happy. That also Fujifilm APS shooters like myself will profit from in the long term, as this will push Fujifilm to work harder than ever. Absolutely true. That's obvious. Now, interestingly, we don't really see the Fujifilm prices going down, which, and I think Patrick's going to explain this later, is probably indicative of Fujifilm's power in the market as the market is, or at least as we understand it. Now, Thom may have something to say on that. So I personally welcome the brand new Nikon Z5, the Sony A7 III, and the Canon EOS RP, and also the Canon EOS R6. But there's something I do not understand. I blog on Fujirumors since almost a decade now, and over all these years, I've heard many times announcements of the death of Fujifilm X series since the launch of the original A7. At the same, Fujifilm APS-C is dead. Voices come back today after the announcement of the Z5. And he asks us to look at a couple of facts. After many years, there's one, by the way, the death proclamations and multiple full-frame mirrorless cameras, Fujifilm is still there. Not only we are still here, but even in the times of COVID, shouldn't have said that word. Fujifilm is the only brand that didn't see a massive sales decrease. You got me, Patrick. You got me. I'm going to remember this. I read it out loud. And number 3, until 2013, in real worldwide mirrorless market share, Fujifilm came third, very close to Canon, far ahead of Olympus, Nikon, and Panasonic. Now, of course, the market may have changed a little bit since then. Things have changed, as we know. Olympus may be on the way out. Nikon, I have no idea, to be very honest. I'm not an analyst, and that's why we're going to drag poor Thom into this. Panasonic, have no idea as well. But I get the idea that Nikon aren't doing very well, but Canon are coming back to places of dominance. We'll see. So, back to Patrick. Either customers are stupid, or they see it the same way as these industry insiders, Deep Review included, who claim the APS-C is the sweet spot. Okay, interesting terminology. I'm half in, half out on that. Why do I think that Fujifilm or the APS-C might be the sweet spot? Or why might I agree with this? Basically, you can get very high quality images with APS-C. And it's true, if you have a full frame, you stop it down to just one stop, you basically get the same full field of view, depth of focus in an equivalent lens. At least if you stop down your full frame camera. And with these new like dual gain or BSI sensors or whatever it is, you can get very good high ISO performance. If you were here for that really long video I did last week, or was it this week? I can't remember, where I compared the X Pro 3 with the R6, with the SH1, no, the S1, with the Z6, in order to see how well detail is meted out at both high ISO and low ISO with all these cameras. And it turns out that the EOS R6 pulled far ahead generally of even the Z6, despite having 4 fewer megapixels. And there was no comparison in general to the X Pro 3, which was the sharpest of the X-T3 and the X-T4. Of those 3 high-end cameras that share the same sensors, the X Pro 3 was the best. But the EOS R6 from ISO 100 and on, as long as we're looking at the JPEGs, no comparison. We're going to go back to the article here. Now, that said, you're not going to get as much detail. Fine, we all know that. But you can get, and I'm not going to say you can get a smaller camera. You can get a smaller camera, but I don't think anyone at this point is really doing the small camera thing in general for the audience that buys camera anymore. And that is because the people that wanted the small cameras, just a travel camera, that wanted a mirrorless just to be as compact as possible, probably are starting to leave their mirrorless at homes and using their smartphones. That's my guess, because it seems to be that most of the focus for everyone is on larger cameras with better ergonomics. Basically, mirrorless cameras are getting larger and more sort of becoming facsimiles in their mirrorless way of DSLRs, just more compact. And so I think that the focus on that at least is off. But you can get X-T3 and XH1. The shutter on that thing is like, and then you got like a full frame camera. Probably the quietest would be something like the Leica M10, which is like, it's like, it's much louder, 3 times louder perhaps. Even if you damp it really well, you have to damp it with a much larger body. I understand the R6 is quieter, but it's not going to touch the X-T4 or the XH1 in terms of quietness. So you can definitely get that. As we see, however, if Fujifilm represents the best of the APS-C world, most rounded lens set, a great variety of high quality cameras in 3 different styles, basically. What ends up happening is that you end up comparing these rather, cameras that are around $2,000, maybe a little bit less, to low-end full-frame cameras. The good news is there's no low-end full-frame camera except for the A7 III, that performs anywhere near these high-end APS-C cameras for frames per second, autofocus, and all that. The bad news is the A7 III, 2 years old now, is way, way better for autofocus than X-T3, X-T4, X Pro 3, and of course, because the full-frame sensor, it's going to have better image quality anyway. It's got bad ergonomics. You're going to get your finger stuck between the lens and the mount, all that. We all know that. But so I have a problem with the assertion that APS-C is good enough for most people, unless you define what most people is. Is there still a most people argument for APS-C? Are most people that buy APS-C cameras also shooting a lot with their smartphone? Are they professionals? Are they real enthusiasts? Like, what is the most people? Now, if you're going to say for professionals, I got to say at this point, Sony are definitely not basically supporting the APS-C realm at all. They have 1 professional lens as far as I know, and the rest are, you can adapt a whole bunch of great lenses to them, but they don't have the lens lineup that they need. Fujifilm are the only one that do. And so when we're talking about APS-C is good enough, you're basically talking about Fujifilm. Now let's go back to the article here. Wait, do I have it right here? Yeah, there we are. So there's one thing, either customer, right? To be clear, the Z5, A7 III, Canon EOS RP, and the Canon EOS R6 are all very nice cameras, but there's one thing that sets Fujifilm apart from all these entry-level full-frame cameras. It can squeeze so much tech into sub-$2,000 cameras that other brands cannot. Interesting assertion. Do we know that? Can they or can they not? The A7 III, when it came out, had as much tech or more tech than the XH1, which is the same price, at least in Japan, same price. Between those 2 cameras, the XH1 fell faster, of course, and the A7 III is still hovering around the $2,000 mark. I don't think that's correct. In other words, their main selling point, full frame, becomes their main limitation. Since if you want to deliver full frame cameras under $2,000, you have to cut costs on the other side. Absolutely, that's true. Absolutely, that's true. Now he's going to explain. A7 III comes at $2,000, but they don't have 2 UHS cards. XH1 also didn't. One was a UHS1. So he's comparing a camera from 2018 to these brand new ones from 2019 and now 2020. And, you know, maybe that's fair because the A7 III is still on the market. But Fujifilm's cameras also in 2018, at least the early part when the A7 III came out, did not have USH2 cards for both slots. It also has the electronic viewfinder at a lower resolution. It can't offer the advanced video features of the X-T4. Of course, you're comparing to a camera 2 years later, hence no 4K 60, again, 2 years later. No 10-bit, again, 2 years later. No high megapixels or Mbps, again, 2 years later. The Nikon Z5 price tag is aggressive, as we know that. He says $1,400, and as we know that, that's what it is. But it's even lower end. Of course it is. You got lower frames per second. This is what I'm worried about. It has lower frames per second. You still have a massive, and he mentions this here, 1.7 crop in 4K, and lower dynamic range compared to other full frame cameras. Possibly. We don't know that for sure. The Canon EOS R6. Now, this is an expensive camera. Got to be honest. I think this one is a little bit too much. It tries to do better than the A7 III and the Z5, but not by compromising on video and hardware features. But that makes it immediately climb up to a price of $2,500 or in Japan more, hence significantly higher than the X-T4. Sure, there's also the EOS RP, but that is better compared to something like an X-T200 or X-T200. Yep. Here's my problem. I think that it's kind of I almost want to say that you should actually compare to the XH1 for a couple of reasons. All of these cameras that he's mentioned have proper grips. They're better in the hand than the X-T4. The Sony has better battery, as we know. But basically, well, actually, the grip on that one is, you know, it's too close to the mount, so there's that problem. But in general, we're comparing a camera that basically was a block that's been upgraded to a slightly nicer to hold block to all these cameras that basically are kind of very slimmed down DSLRs. And that's kind of a problem. So hypothetically, it'd be nice if we had an XH2 here that would have the X-T4 specs or better, that we could kind of like bring in here and compare back and forward. But you know, it's a good article you should check out. But in this article, there's a whole, I mean, what are there? There's something like 459 comments. And lo and behold, in this article, I was pleasantly surprised to see that, let's see. Oh shoot, did I do it? Just a moment here, guys. I was pleasantly surprised to see that Thom made his way back in here. I don't see him that often in Fujirumors comment sections. Back when I was a Nikon user, I saw him and really appreciated seeing him in the Nikon Rumors threads. And he always brought really well thought out commentary to a lot of sometimes sensationalist articles. And it was really nice. However, here he is in the Fujirumors one. And what does he do? Well, let's search here. Wait, do I have it? Sorry, guys. I'm still trying to figure out this whole streaming things here. We're going to go Thom. Search for Thom. And like, I thought we had more than that. We got to load up the entire comments here. Sorry about that, guys. Wow. This is what a Generation Xer is like. I'm like the last end of Generation X, so I'm like the youngest Gen X out there, and I'm 40. Imagine the guys at the top would be 60 roughly. So I think a lot of these guys that you younger guys call boomers are actually Gen Xers, and I think we accept it basically. I'm using, by the way, my broken mouse, so it kind of clicks sometimes and kind of doesn't. I'm gonna scroll all the way down here. Sorry, guys. Maybe that's good enough. All right, scroll back up, and then we're gonna search for Thom. Looks like here I see 61 different comments possibly here. We're gonna go. Wait, that's the bottom here. I'm not sure if that's. All right, let's go here. I think this is the first one he did. Basically, he starts commenting here. As far as I can see, it could be earlier. And this is where I'm a little bit confused here. Looks like this is the first one. All right, where did you go, Thom? Tommy, come back to me. There it is. There it is. Okay, so the comment that leads us in is this guy named Bobby Supardi. He's like, the future is with a doubt belong to full-frame mirrorless. Market is shrinking, so camera manufacturers like Sony, Panasonic, Canon, and Nikon will focus their R&D on full-frame mirrorless mount only. Benefits and prices of APS-C compared to full-frame will diminish. Maybe one day APS-C cameras will be more expensive to produce in full-frame. Fuji will be forced to become street retro style accessories. Whether you like it or not, Fuji will only go downward from now on. Smart ones will sell their cameras before the price starts dropping, and the fools or ignorant ones will collect them and end up suffering great loss. All right, I can't imagine that's going to go well on Fujirumors, and I don't necessarily agree with that. Space Monkey replies, I disagree for three reasons. One, full-frame sensors will always be more expensive to produce than APS-C sensors. Prices might go down globally. That's true for all sensor sizes. True, by the way. Two, this discussion always takes as an example the most expensive APS-C camera and compares it to the cheapest full-frame camera, and then people say, see, they're almost the same price. But it doesn't make sense, and since you can find recent APS-C cameras for less than $500, let's stop comparing apples to oranges. Three, if that were true, camera manufacturers like Sony, Canon, and Nikon wouldn't even produce APS-C cameras and focus all their money and efforts on full frame to avoid self-cannibalizing their own product. But they do have an APS-C lineup, and that's even getting more attention lately. Why on earth would they invest in something dying? APS-C isn't dying at all and isn't going to disappear. For the very reason cheap cars, cheap laptops, cheap TVs, cheap smartphones aren't going to disappear, that's in most cases all that a majority of people can afford or are willing to pay. Full frame is a luxury product for the wealthiest ones, for the pros. People go crazy when they see they can buy new full frame camera priced at $1,400, but that's still a very expensive item. It is, absolutely, for 99% of people on Earth. And you need to add lenses, which are also very expensive. No kid or photography enthusiast starts photography on a $1,400 camera. They'll do what everyone does, start with a cheap DSLR, entry-level mirrorless cameras. These entry-level cameras are essential to this business, like entry-level smartphones and cars are essential to other industries. A very good comment overall, and it's pretty cool that Thom decided to address this one. And he comes back with a comment with 2 likes, by the way, rather than 4, but he addresses each point in turn. Now, here's where we start looking at this dude. Oh, by the way, you got a comment here from Chirag. This week, GFX, X Pro 3, X100V, XH1 equals Japanese, while XT4, XT30, X200 equals Chinese and Indonesian. Although you meant built in Japan? Yeah, that's as far as I understand. Yeah, but I'm not actually that upset about that. I am from a, let's say, a national perspective. Like, I think it's fine that these multinational companies build all over the world. At this point, okay, I have no loyalty to the idea of a multinational. If they're not building things within their own country by their own country people, I don't see the point. Like, they're no longer a Japanese company as far as I am concerned, or they're no longer a German company. They are a global company. So if they're going to build all around the world anyway, as long as I can consider that company basically a global brand that I can't invest my soul into, because they're not investing their soul into the country from which they come, meaning they don't employ the people, they don't do all their development there, etc., then it's kind of like, yeah, well, whatever. It's just let's just think of this as another capitalistic venture, which of course it is, but it's like, it's hard to get excited about the fact that they make some cameras in Japan and some others not. If they made everything in Japan, yeah, that would be, and it's not because of the quality thing. It's just, if you're a Japanese company and you can do it, make it in Japan. Find a way to do it. Find a way. Anyway, got off topic here. Thom says, number 1, correct. While the cost ratio has come down now to limit to the implied physical constraints, wafer cost, wafer time, wafer waste, time on fab, APS-C will always be proportionately lower cost to produce than full frame. Number 2, yes, but. The but is that camera makers don't really want to sell US $500 cameras anymore. With the volume so far down, they no longer need to get the mass market benefits of pricing low. Obviously, you need something priced under $1,000 to get the price-sensitive group into the fold, but most of the repeated buying is now in the plus $200 or $2,000 realm, and it shows in the CIPA statistic. This is a bit intentional on the part of the camera makers. As camera dealers die and the virus is killing a lot of them here in the US, the ability to put lower cost products in front of the potential customer decreases. Big box requires manufacturers to pay to play. This is something we rarely, people absolutely do focus on this, but I think Thom, as always, says it really clearly. That is, we all know that the lower end of the camera world is being cannibalized. Whether it's being cannibalized by smartphones or there's something that we don't know yet, that's what's happening. the people that will buy a $500 camera are not buying it. They're sticking with their smartphone, and they do plenty good. And people that are still enthusiasts in this world that, let's say, 15 years ago were enthusiasts and that represented that sort of niche are still in it in general. And most of them are buying probably higher end cameras than they did 15 years ago. And the people that 15 years ago were buying a cheap camera because there wasn't something like a smartphone that had a good quality camera, are buying smartphones, or they're buying something else. They were never in it for the photography. The photography business boomed probably because there wasn't, or the digital photography business probably boomed because you finally had some sort of digital way, quick way to get your photographs up and either show your Facebook people, your blog people, whatever, show your family. And there wasn't previously. And once that step that was also better than the film and then scanning process was, once that was removed because you could just do it from your smartphone, then those people no longer needed that camera. And those people probably never bought another lens. So I don't think that's definitely something not to even bother about. Number 3, Canon's sort of the outlier here. They still have over a dozen APS-C choices that are current. It's almost as if they don't know how to stop themselves. Nikon and Sony have slowed their release of the APS-C products. Technically, Sony only has 3, a6100, a6400, and a6600. Nikon only has 2 that are reasonably current, the D7500 and the the Z50. While they've iterated the number on the D3000X series several times, it's basically the same camera with manufacturing cost cutting. We can measure things. APS-C is decreasing fairly rapidly in terms of overall volume, while full frame is not. That's changing the balance point considerably. Will we still have some APS-C models? Absolutely. And Fujifilm has no choice in this matter due to previous decisions. And you know what? This is kind of this point is one of those points where basically Fujifilm users for many years have basically been stuck here. That is, Fujifilm decided to stay with APS-C, and there's no problem with that. But some of the users, a lot of them perhaps, especially as we understand Tom's comment, that a lot of people who are still in this enthusiast world of the cameras, at least, they've come into this from higher end cameras, probably, or middle range cameras. And a lot of them will come from full frame. And let's see, just go back here a second here. So because of that, a lot of people, not a lot, but every long thread, you're going to see someone in there that's like, I wish Fujifilm would have brought out a full frame camera. They won't. That ship has sailed. So Fujifilm absolutely do have to stick with it. But there's still people who wish they did make full frame. And I totally understand that. I don't want them to. I'm not sure if they could handle it necessarily. And that's just because not really sure they've handled the GFX that well. We'll talk about that another time. As for starting with photography, many people do that with phones now. At some point, there are things you can't do with phones that require an ILC, but people are paying $1,000 for these phone cameras. US 1000 for something that is clearly better and not going to be eclipsed anytime soon by the phones isn't out of the question. This is absolutely right. And again, a lot of people, they say smartphones kill this, but you got to get into the detail. Why is it smartphones kill this? Anyway, Tom goes on. He's got, as far as I can tell, he's got at least 61 comments. When I go over to his, let's go over to his discuss page here. Watch this. This is crazy. Okay, it's showing his discuss page. You can click on his handle and you'll basically go straight to his discuss page. He's got 11,000 comments. If you go right to the top, it shows discussion on Fujirumors, which is like he's still going. This is not the same article, but he's basically commenting on another article that just went mad. It's got 2,000 or 200 comments, and he ends up commenting to a lot of, like, if you can tell, he's got a lot of like comments here. One of the reasons he does something that a lot of people on the internet don't, and something that I've tried to fix myself that I have found myself making a mistake of, as if you make a mistake, you later correct it and you do it publicly saying that you were wrong. So Tom here, he said, sorry, I was in a hurry to get out the door when I posted, got the wrong number. So he then explains the numbers that are actually there, as opposed to the ones that he originally put out, which for one reply was wrong. But if here, the Fujifilm APS-C is dead, he's going, you can scroll way down. And these are just the Tom comments, It looks like 10. And then he's really super duper active in this thread. And this is a good thread to read. There's a lot of back and forth with a lot of people, and it's a very emotional thread. I think the people that come to Fujifilm mirrorless from Nikon especially are looking back at Nikon. They're like, Nikon are actually putting a little bit of effort into this, and whether or not they like the look of the Z5 or the Z6 or the Z7 or the Z50, whether or not they wish that it had higher frames per second or not, or whether they wish it had a lower crop, whether they wish it was easier to do the autofocus stuff, people are looking at Nikon back in sort of a nostalgic way. And I think if Nikon can weather the storm, listen, I don't know any of this analytics stuff, but if they do well, I have a feeling that Fujifilm are actually in a tough spot. Exactly for the reason that Thom said, and exactly, well, kind of what I alluded to. The people that wanted a smartphone, well, that wanted a camera, cheap, etc., with a cheap lens to take pictures, to put on their blogs, etc., have moved to smartphones, and smartphones are doing a plenty good job for that. And the people that were there 15 years ago buying high-end cameras have moved on. I mean, not moved on, like they've got their smartphones, but they've basically stayed in the same pay grade, but moved either to mirrorless, either they can possibly down a sensor, possibly up a sensor, but they've stayed in the same world, and they're not going to go anywhere unless, of course, their business or something else is wrecked by any sort of thing that happens out in the world. So this is something that we got to remember. And at this point, if we have a bulk of people that are still buying cameras that are thinking, I'd like to buy a camera between $1,500 and let's say $2,500, the cameras in that range that are really stirring things up in terms of performance, autofocus, and all that are not APS-C cameras. Sony's A6400 is, I think, a little bit cheaper than that. It's not as nice a camera, not as good weather sealing or anything like that, harder to hold than the top Fujifilm one, but it's got better autofocus. And those autofocus benefits that are on that camera went to the A7, went to the A9. It looks like, as far as we can tell, Canon's R6 is better still, or at least it's way better than the R5. So not the R5, the R, and possibly better than their medium to high-end DSLRs. I mean, we have, when it comes down to performance, yes, you can get great Fujifilm colors. We now have those like webcam things that you can enjoy right on the right from your camera and on your computer, from Fujifilm as well as from Canon, and I believe Nikon are working on it. We have all that stuff, but we do not have parity in performance. And when it comes down to it, full frame's always going to outperform APS-C, except in maybe sensor readout speed. Of course, we have the A9 that basically says no, as well as the FP, by the way, Sigma FP. If you look at that, there's no jello effect. Evidently, that thing's perhaps one of the fastest readout speed cameras in the world. Maybe the A9 is better, maybe not. I don't know. You're going to have the autofocus benefits. I mean, Canon are pulling ahead of Fujifilm right now. Got to be very honest. Like I've said before, my 5D Mark II focuses in lowish to low light, faster in the center of the frame than the X-T3 does. That's a camera from 2018, X-T3 versus 2008, the 5D2, and that's ridiculous. So when it comes down to it, as much as Fujifilm will throw into it, I don't think you're going to get as much back out. So if you have to buy, let's say, a $1,500 camera, the X-T4, or is it $1,600, something like that, or maybe even $1,700, it's the top of the heap for the APS-C at the moment. We can expect the XH1 to be more money. By the time that comes out, we're probably going to see the R6 down to, say, $2,300, $2,200. And the difference between a camera that is more its actual equal in terms of price, you probably pushing $100 to $200, but you're definitely going to get way higher quality from the Canon. I don't for a moment believe that the XH2 is going to be able to keep up with the Canon R6. Absolutely not. If the X-T3 is so far behind and the X-T4 better than the X-T3, and has the same processor inside, just better firmware, and of course the IBIS, can't forget that. If that's basically the top of the heat from Fujifilm at the moment, and you're being bested seriously bested in all sort of photo focuses, from eyes to real-time face tracking to basically just 3D tracking in general, from an A7 number 3 from 2018. I don't think that we're going to be able to best that in the next couple of years from Fujifilm. So what is it? Eventually, you have to decide, what is it with Fujifilm that we really like? Myself, it comes down to their Fujifilm film simulations. They're amazing, absolutely amazing. And as we saw in the comparison video I did before, their JPEGs, fine, you can't compare them to a full frame. They're not as sharp, whatever. But if you're editing with their JPEGs, you get a lot of information, both in the highlights and in the shadows, that don't exist in the JPEGs of any other company. No, they're not as good as RAWs. But as we know, if you've been using Fujifilm for even since the very first days, I think, of the X-Trans, and I didn't use the first X100, so I don't know. But if you used it back from 2012, 2013, you'll know basically that camera is able to, you're basically able to use JPEGs, not perfectly in lieu of RAW, but you're able to use them if you're losing out on space or whatever, and you don't want to have to do the extra processing power later on. You don't have to rely on a non-Adobe product. The JPEGs are incredible. Shoot a RAW in a JPEG just to be safe, but the JPEGs are incredible. After that, what is it? Well, they do have higher build quality than other APS-C cameras to an extent. I think that the DSLR, like the high-end DSLRs like the D500, as well as the Canon 7D Mark II, have better build quality overall. They're easier to hold, better battery life, and faster and more reliable autofocus to an extent. You can't go out to the sides. You can't do face tracking with them. But when it comes to like central focus, there's, in terms of speed and the simplicity and basic following quality, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that the Fujifilm's basically able to stand up to that. It's kind of tough. It's absolutely kind of tough. And those cameras now cost quite a bit less, and of course they're older. The 7D is what, 2014, 16 was it? 15, 16, something like that. It's a lot older, right? 4 years versus 2 years, and then you have the Nikon one, which somewhere around the same time frame, but that one is even, I don't know. It's a total powerhouse. And Fujifilm, in terms of that, in that realm for fast action photography, they just cannot compare. Absolutely cannot compare. Nikon walk all over them with their DSLRs. Canon walk all over them with their DSLRs. And when it comes to mirrorless, Sony's, which are not as nice to use, are not as well built, don't have the lens range, still focus better. So if you're in the Fujifilm range, you have to be in it for things that are not the focus quality. It can't be that. It cannot be that. And I'm not going to even address the sort of like indication that it's in focus, but it's not later on. I'm not going to address that. You also have to be in it. What else? What else would be it? The look. Let's be honest. It's all about the look. You have the dials on the top. You can, to an extent, set it before you turn it on, etc. It's got that sort of, and there's a lot of what I like, actually. I hate it and I like it. It's the drive mode. Go from S to SHL to video and all that, depending on the camera. And in one dial, you can't lock it, so you might screw up and get into another one anyway. But basically, you have a lot of pretty good direct controls. You can't lock them, and that is a problem. But when it comes down to it, I got to be very honest, and this is why I'm definitely hanging on to my Fujifilm gear till the end of the year, absolutely. But I probably am going to switch to Canon. It's when it comes down to price performance ratios, it doesn't track. The body is cheaper with the Fujifilm, but if I get an EOS R6, that thing with a couple of EOS EF lenses as well as EF lenses, those ones on an adapter perform better, both for focus as well as like focus speed as well as focus quality for both video and stills than a Fujifilm. And they're cheap. You can get so many cheap, good Canon lenses. They're 50 millimeter, they're 35-2, they're 24 2.8, they're 24 2.8, they're 40 STM. They have cheap macros that work really well, that work. They're like stuff from like 20 years ago. It's perfectly fine. So I think absolutely Thom is right and other people are right. What we have here is a problem. $2,000 range and a little bit cheaper is, in the long run, if you're going to buy full frame and get equivalent Now here's where Tom's gonna cover this. If you get equivalent lenses, full frame is going to probably be cheaper, as well as not much heavier and not much more expensive. Now Thom covers that. Where is it? Just a second here. We're gonna go here. Thom Hogan was talking about equivalence 1/7. I'm just gonna go up, up, up. All right. He has an article. I'm gonna link that here. Let's put that in the chat. By the way, got a comment here. Cool discussion and StreamYard is steady. Please keep this video so I can rewatch. That's from infophotography.com. I don't know. I've never seen that person. I don't know if they're spam or not. Hopefully not. Welcome if you're not spam. Thom Hogan. Basically, he's going to mention right here equivalence. And this is where things really go pear-shaped. It always goes pear-shaped whenever you bring this up. I used to really be gung-ho on the whole equivalence thing. But gotta be honest, man, it's very tough to be right about equivalence. What I mean is you can be 100% right, 100% logical, 100% reasonable. But even if you define your terms perfectly, and Thom does in this article here that I just linked, people are not going to follow you and they're going to defend the brand. So right here, Thom says, sorry, physics doesn't work as you suggest. First, when I speak of equivalence, I speak of the exact same image. Too many people sneak other factors into their arguments and aren't actually talking about equivalence anymore. Second, exposure is light filtered by aperture filtered by shutter speed. Some number of photons light make it through the whole aperture and a time period of collection shutter speed. However, light gathering is determined by the area in which you gather that light, and I don't know how to pronounce the word, Poisson distribution then comes into play because photons are random. Larger collection is better than smaller collection, all else equal. Again, equivalence. Now, if you click right here, view and discussion, this could be bad. Let's just click it and see what happens. Hopefully this is coming up on the screen. Is it coming up on the screen? Oh, didn't come up on the screen. Why is that? Why didn't that come up on the screen? Well, anyway, I'll read the comment down here. Wait, where did it go, Thom? I had this all prepared. Equivalence. Right. All right. First, Thom's first. Actually, sorry, this is his actual first comment. Here's the thing. I've been writing about this for over a decade now. Wait. All right. We read that one. All right, let's go down here. Wait, I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, I kind of made a mistake here. So that's why I'm kind of like, whoa, what am I doing? All right, let's go back to that. Okay, we're just going to read this comment. It's a long one from Thom. I didn't read this one. It's a good one. Here's the thing. I've been writing about this for over a decade now. Where do your customers come from? For Canon and Nikon, it's simple. Most of the customers come from existing users who upgrade. The remaining new customers come from word of mouth from the existing customers. Given the millions of Canon, Nikon, EF users out there, these groups are considerable in size and overly influence the market. When Fujifilm first came back to ILC after the flirtation with Nikon mount DSLRs, I wrote about where the Fujifilm customers were coming from. Nikon DX users who were sampling or switching, mostly because they didn't perceive Nikon as responding to them. That's actually true. Nikon from 2010 onwards had a move to FX strategy in place and still exists and being replicated in mirrorless with the Z system. So Fujifilm's customers were coming from other mounts. Go ahead, pull your customers and see what mount they were using before they picked up the XF. You'll see what I mean. The problem for Fujifilm now is slightly less big than what Olympus faced. Smaller sensor originally allowed smaller bodies, but if you look at Canon RP, Nikon Zs, Sony's As, and those full-frame bodies, you'll have downsized considerable, and they're down-priced considerably. Thus, you're seeing comparisons between X-T4, Z5, Z6, and A7 now. The Z5 undercuts X-T4 in price, so has to be perceived as better to justify that. Using a smaller sensor. Not that that can't be done, but effectively, Fujifilm's upside has been considerably undermined by the full-frame mirrorless happenings, and that's going to get worse by moving forward. Canon, Nikon, and Sony are all in with full-frame strategies now, with APS-C only a lower-cost entry supplement for the most part. In other words, we're back to where we were with DSLRs when Fujifilm split, and back to where we were with film SLRs. Fujifilm has to up their game to make further progress, is my take. They're going to have to price pressure on their upper models. They're going to have a difficult time increasing volume in the APS-C line. That was a long but good comment overall. Why is it? People have said everything that Thom has said here before. They're not as clean with how they say it. When I try to say something like that, and I never say everything as nice as that in one bit, and I could never do it. But when you try to say it, and I think in general, a person like myself or a lot of these other guys who say the same stuff, who are more randoms on the internet, who are not people that are in general well respected, they'll just get belligerent responses. Now, Thom, of course, gets belligerent responses. However, because he breaks things down so clearly from the first part or from the start, it's hard to find fault anywhere to even argue. However, despite that, we do have an answer from Radiant Flowers. Except the here's what he says. Except the FF glass saying that f2.8 70 to 200 FF equivalent is much larger than Fujifilm's 50 to 100. I can shoot all day. I can shoot an all-day event with a 50 to 140 and be fine. Shooting with the Nikon 80 to 200 f2.8 is another thing altogether, a slog. It's not just body size where Fujifilm still has advantage over full frame. It's lens size. Plus Kaizen firmware updates, color science is a real system. Though Fujifilm was late to the speed light part of this. Thom, you missed more than half of Fujifilm's appeal. I can imagine. Now all right. This is like a drama section here. He's got everything wrong here. This is how I would approach this. There is no such thing as an equivalent in APS-C to an f2.8 70 to 200 f full frame equivalent. There's nothing there. Nothing anywhere. If there was, it would be the same size. We have 2.8 50 to 140 40 millimeter lenses, but those return an equivalent depth of focus as an f4 lens, and there are f4 lenses for full frame. We all know that, and of course, the big benefit for APS-C. I'm sorry, I'm so like because all these anagrams or not anagrams. What are they? Anachronisms. That's not the word, but it could be that some of these companies going out of business will become anachronism. But we have a smaller sensor, and because of that, you can expose with an f2.8 lens and basically freeze the action much faster and get better focus performance because it's got, I suppose you could say, more light on the smaller sensor than an f4. Because of that, that may be better. But at this point, using even an older Fujifilm or a Canon camera versus a Fujifilm one from today, I'm finding that the focus quality, even with an f2.8 lens versus a possibly slower lens on a Canon, I'm not seeing better focus quality in normal light where you would use an f2.8 lens anyway. You're not going to use an f2.8 lens in like a dark venue anyway. And if you take your X-T3, for instance, to a dark venue, you're not going to focus as well as your old 5D Mark II. So this is not really, not sure where he's getting a sort of equivalent. He should have just, he knows there's an f4 version. I'm not sure why he wouldn't bring that up. Also interesting that he says shooting with the Nikon 80 to 200 f2.8. That is what, a 30-year-old lens now? I had that same lens. I had the 28 to 70, which was also a 30-year-old lens. That was one of their first AFS lenses. Great lens, doesn't have VR. It's 30 years old. He's comparing it to a lens that's 25, that came out in 2015 or 2016. And he's, again, it's not really equivalent. Anyway, he's like, Thom missed half of that. Now, the problem, once you say that Thom's missed something, you're going to have people, possibly like myself, other people that might end up trying to white knight for Thom, but that's stupid. You don't got to do that. Thom knows how to white. He doesn't have to be wit knitted for, right? He's written blogs for decades. He knows how to argue his point. People like me would be like, Thom, got your back, man. Doesn't need it. Any person that comes and be like, Thom, got your back, you're doing Thom a disservice. Thom replies here. Technically, there's a stop difference between APS-C and full frame, so it might surprise you to find that the Sony 70-200 f4G is the same length and 5 ounces lighter. 5 likes. Hands down, boom. Sunset is what it should be. And then we get arguments. By the way, you can scroll down and we got arguments that go on for about 6 comments. At this point, guys, I think we can close that bit. Don't need that anymore. But once you open the equivalence can of worms, and by the way, I'll scroll through this one here. Chrome tab. Equivalence in a nutshell. This bad boy here is worth a read. I would say it like this. Oh, actually, you know what? Equivalence seems to be a topic that is still misunderstood. What you want in equivalence is, and this is Thom saying it, same depth or same field of view. So if it's a 35mm lens on full frame, you want a lens that will return a similar field of view. So like a 23 or 24mm lens on APS-C. Then you want the same depth of field. This is the one probably that most people really get upset at, because they have essentially an equivalent in terms of exposure. If your 50 to 140 lens is the one that you can break to a 70-200, you basically have the same focus range roughly, and you have the same exposure like specs. So you can just set your camera to ISO 100 or 160 or 200. Let's say set both cameras to 200, f2.8, set to the same exposure, and you'll be able to get the same darkness or lightness from both images from a full frame and APS-C camera. But of course, the problem ends up becoming that with the APS-C, you got more depth of focus. Now, that's not necessarily a problem, because if you have more depth of focus, you got more stuff in focus. Your subject is then sharper, possibly overall, as well as you're going to have possibly better lighting on the subject with a little bit less fall off. But if, and this is one that really stopped me, if you're a person that uses your 70-200 as a portrait lens, and a lot of people do, you zoom it way down to like 130, 150, 200, something like that, and you put it to f2.8, and you go, pacha, you'll get amazing bokeh. If you use the 50 to 140, the bokeh is not very good on that thing, and you got a lot less blur. You are essentially using an f4 lens on a full frame. And sure, you have the same exposure, but you don't have the nice blur. Then he goes on, same level of noise. Now, as we know, full frame is going to have less noise. It's roughly a stop, which basically f2.8 to f4 is a stop. Same exposure, same perspective. If you connect all those things and use all of those in your definition of equivalent, then you're going to find that for every APS-C or full frame f4 lens, its equivalent in APS-C terms is a 2.8. And they're going to be the same size. Sometimes the APS-C will be bigger and heavier. Sometimes the full frame will be heavier and bigger. And sometimes, a lot of times in fact, you're going to find that the APS-C is more expensive. And that goes for like the, if you're looking at the portrait lenses, like the 56 1.2 is more expensive than its equivalent in field of view, depth of field, motion blur, level of noise, exposure, and perspective as an 85 1.8. Now, does it give you a better image? Maybe it'll give you an image that you prefer. Maybe it's sharper. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But the point is this. For every lens that you complain about being too big and too expensive with full frame, you are more than likely going to have an option in full frame that gives you the exact equivalence in output image on your APS-C that you think is, cheaper, lighter, and all that. So that's the equivalence thing. By the way, it goes on. People are going to be like, there's this guy last week or the week before, this guy named Inya. Let's go back to Thom Hogan here. Let's go back to Thom Hogan. All right. Take that out. Share this bad boy here. Chrome tab. Discuss. Here we are. All right. All right. So there's this guy named Inya, and if you click on his profile, he doesn't let you follow him his stuff. But he responded to me a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, and he's like, "Why are you always on about full frame and APS-C?" And you know what? I got to be honest. I probably post about full frame and APS-C in the relevant articles 1 out of 4 times, 1 out of 3 times in the relevant articles. Otherwise, I don't. But he was like, "It's you that's always complaining about it," and I had basically made a comment that said, "Actually." We're as a group, we're always trying to downplay full frame, always going back to full frame and sort of basically bad mouthing it. GFX is way better than it, way better than it. At the same time, there's barely any size difference, 60% size difference in the sensor for GFX versus full frame. You do get better tonal range, you do get better noise, you do get a sharper image, but it's very tiny. And with APS-C and full frame, the sensor is 2.25 times the size rather than 0.6 times the size or 1.6 times the size. It's much larger. And then at the same time, and another photographer recently mentioned this, the APS-C users in Fujifilm will pish-poo the Micro Four Thirds users. They'll be like, "Your sensor is not good enough, too much noise, etc." And the difference between APS-C and Micro Four Thirds is just a little bit bigger than the difference between full frame and GFX, or slightly smaller. And the point is that difference is always apologized for with Fujifilm fans. And the reason is because they're stuck to APS-C. I think if they had options in the full frame realm, no one would care. But you have to defend whatever group you're in. You got to defend it, you know. And some of us that are like, I don't wish that they had full frame. I'm glad that they have APS-C. I like the options they have with medium format and full frame. At the same time, it's very obvious. Pick up a D800, pick up your GFX. The difference between those two is pretty damn small. But if you pick up your XT3 and your D800, it's massive differences. Even though the jump in resolution is roughly equivalent to the jump from D800 to GFX, the differences in noise and everything is under controlled lights is massive. Go outside, shoot your kids. The differences are tiny. They don't really matter. But where it matters, it's huge. Anyway, this guy, Ninya, he ended up commenting over and over in the same thread. And I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. And he commented at least 12 times, could be more, like 15. By now, it could be 20, about full frame and APS-C after saying that he doesn't do it, that I only do it. And okay, stupid me. I was like, every single time I cataloged it, I was like, it's you that's obsessed it. And then I put number 1, number 2. I counted it down to 12. And then I got a whole bunch of feedback. And yes, I was stupid to do it. But I wanted to prove a point. Never prove a point on the internet, man. If people are upset at you, that's cool. That's cool. Just let them do it. That's it. You don't got to prove that you're right. But if you do want to prove that you're right, you got to make sure you do it like Thom. Make sure that you got your 5 points. Make sure that each is clear. Make sure that you're not tripping over your words like moi. And just say it. And if you got to follow up, don't follow up in the sort of belligerent way. Make sure that you're following up in a nice, gentlemanly manner. And you just take it to the subject, never to the man. Mea culpa. Anyway, that's it for me. If anyone, I'll tell you guys, if any of you guys have any questions, please bring it up. I think Thom definitely defended himself very well. Not that he had to. He basically had all the important things in his posts, and the people that argued with him were arguing from generally an emotional or an ignorant standpoint. And that's just my take of that. So I'm going to drink this beer here. And actually, I'm going to start with the coffee, finish the coffee. And if anyone's got anything to add, then we'll do it. We'll chat. If not, then just sip my coffee here and explain how this, as we're leaving, counting off here, I'm going to explain how this thread actually happened and wasn't supposed to happen. I was actually going to reschedule it. Probably should have done that. And I was going to head over to my friend's house to watch Battlestar Galactica. We're on series 3. The reason I brought that series up is because we watched Avengers Endgame last year together. and both of us liked it at first. We were then later a little bit disappointed with it, and I explained that you really should watch Battlestar Galactica, the way that they handle the sort of cataclysmic loss of most of the population, and not just half, like 99% of it is much better than it was. And he's like, really? So we're basically trying to get through the entire Battlestar Galactica series, the 2000 series, not the 1978 series, and it's really, really good. It's also it's from a photography perspective, it's bad. It's obviously low budget. There's a lot of noisy handheld stuff. Sometimes the angles are a little bit weird, but man, the writing is just brilliant, and it holds up. Everything holds up 20 years on. That's what I was gonna do, but I made the mistake of having a beer, and in Japan it's it's zero tolerance, so you can't do that. Don't want to risk it, so I'm here, and we're doing this without maybe the proper preparation. Maybe we are doing it the right preparation. Maybe we're just maybe just Thom Hogan is not the most exciting topic for everyone. Maybe it's my FF and APS-C stumbles that got everyone mum. Anyway, is that good? Well, I guess we're good, guys. I don't see any questions in the chat. So what we're gonna do here is we're just gonna turn on the farewell music and say thank you everyone who watched this one. We'll have a couple more live things to go later on, and in the next week, and I have a couple reviews coming up. I wasn't able to finish the 21.4 Fauxtaku last week. The reasons for that were I broke a toe, and my tennis elbow is hurting real bad, so it's hard to type, and that was kind of one of the reasons I'm behind on the reviews. Got a couple of earphones coming in as well, by the way, from what's the brand? Dunu, as well as can't remember the brand. They're pretty awesome. So we'll be doing some earphone stuff and mini disc. Got some mini disc comparisons coming up. So if any of you guys who are in this, who are into cameras, or also into mini disc, let's keep that on the back burner and look forward to some good comments or some good content coming up later. So thank you very much, everyone who was here, and thank you very much for sticking with me as I'm learning this whole thing. And I definitely don't have the personality worked out yet, but we'll see what we do. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. By the way, thanks out to Chirag. Thank you very much for informing me where everything's made and keeping up. Infophotography.com. If I don't know if you're if you're real, if you're not like one of those a troll or whatever, awesome, great to have you. And Ashok, thank you very much. It's awesome that you are also a Thom follower. Obviously, he has all the benefits of like pith, and I have none of the benefits, especially when I'm speaking. Perhaps when I write, I don't know. But thank you guys very much. I'll see you next time.